Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second set of award talks this afternoon. Thank you for being here, and thank you for filling up the front. It's always nice in such a big room to have people filling up the seats. I'm Kateri Salk. I'm the co-chair of the awards committee with ASLO. If you are enjoying these talks this afternoon, please consider nominating your colleagues. It's a great honor, and it's a great way to recognize the impact that our colleagues have on each other. So, just a quick plug, watch out for those announcements. I'm very pleased today to be introducing the Yentsch-Schindler Early Career Award. This award honors an early career scientist, for their outstanding contributions to research, science training, and broader societal issues. The award is named after eminent limnologist David Schindler and visionary educator and oceanographer Claire Yentsch. This year, we are honoring Alanna Lecher for this award for her pioneering research that applies a holistic view of groundwater processes across aquatic ecosystems and coastal archaeological landscapes, as well as her dedication to teaching translational work with stakeholders, which has resulted in impactful applied outcomes, effective leadership, and sustained mentorship of undergraduate students. A few highlights about Dr. Lecher. She is the Assistant Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences for Lynn University. Her work lies at the interface of groundwater, coastal ecosystems, and archaeology. Some of the key impacts, which I was really pleased to learn about, are the impacts of sea level rise on archaeological sites and how we preserve them, and inclusion of groundwater processes in archaeological site preservation. Dr. Lecher's service and mentorship includes board membership of the Florida Undergraduate Research Association. She is the founder of the Lynn University Women in Science Conference and the co-founder of the Florida Archaeology Network Field School. I would encourage everyone to read the award citation. It's a really lovely tribute to Dr. Lecher's work and her impacts thus far in her career. And I'd like everyone to join me in welcoming and congratulating our Yentsch-Schindler Award winner, Dr. Alanna Lecher.
I wanted to start my talk today by reflecting on the three pillars that this award is based on, and that is equal contributions to research, science training, and broader societal issues, each of which has really become a very core part of my professional career, even to the point that the number of educational articles that I've published at this point is almost on parity with the number of aquatic science articles that I've published. So they all really are equal contributing factors and efforts in my professional career. I also want to acknowledge the organizations that helped me pursue all of these pillars. Lynn University, where I work as an assistant dean and associate professor, and which is the base of my research. The Florida Public Archaeology Network, which is a state educational organization and who I collaborate heavily with, both in terms of research and public outreach. And the Florida Undergraduate Research Association, which is a nonprofit organization and on which I've been a board member for the past 6 years and am currently vice president. So my goal is to spend equal time on each of these things today, but I wanted to start with research. Going into graduate school, I knew that I wanted to study submarine groundwater discharge, which is nominally groundwater discharge to the ocean, but if you asked anyone who studies SGD, as we call it, they'll tell you it's a little bit more complicated than that. And in graduate school, the specific thing I wanted to look at with SGD was its effect on the methane cycle. So this led me to conduct several studies in the Arctic Ocean, which contributed to our knowledge of SGD globally in ways I had not anticipated, because although there are many, many studies at tropical and temperate latitudes, there are very few studies about SGD at high latitudes. And actually, we've begun to have a lot of meta-analyses occur where we're coming up with global SGD estimates. And those early ones even excluded the Arctic Ocean. But now because of this research, they've been able to include that, including one that is currently in review. And you can see that from the review paper on the right, my contribution to SGD was also, in the Arctic, was also to come up with this synthesis of how SGD was occurring and the importance of it in the Arctic Ocean. And even though I'm not able to study in the Arctic anymore due to my current position, I'm happy to say other SGD scientists have continued that work. Something that I was forced to do by my advisor in graduate school, which I was originally not wanting to, was to do a phytoplankton bioassay experiment to actually ascertain the effect of SGD on a phytoplankton community in California. And prior to that, a lot of SGD papers, which are done largely by hydrologists and chemical oceanographers, made estimates of what the impact was, largely through upscaling nutrient discharge estimates through Redfield ratios. And when I did my own experiment, I found that the results were not exactly what I anticipated. And then I did another one, and then the results were also not what I anticipated. And I decided that I needed to embark down a journey that would better define and document what the actual impacts were of SGD on marine ecosystems. So this led first to me writing a review paper looking at 75 studies that had actually measured what the biological response of SGD was to an ecosystem, and to try to come up with some categories of what those responses were, and then later to quantify the likelihood of these responses based on also the number of papers that had been studied, at that point a little over 100, that documented those responses, and which showed that the results are somewhat complicated. So to help SGD scientists better come up with discussions and predicted impacts, I also developed a database on my personal website, which lists all of these papers that SGD scientists can use to find either the organisms they're looking at or ecosystems to better discuss the impacts of SGD. Moving on to broader societal issues, groundwater followed me here. I was first asked to come help at an archaeological excavation in Palm Beach County, where I live, because the county was concerned about the impacts of climate change on a coastal archaeological site that was buried. And while they were well aware that sea level rise could come over top the site and it could get wet that way, I soon learned that they had no idea that the water table was also rising in response to sea level rise, and that this could actually be impacting sites in the state of Florida now, not just in the future. So working with archaeologists, I conducted a series of studies to document and show that this was happening, to come with estimations of where it's happening, tools that archaeologists could use to see if this was impacting their site, and then to also quantify and determine what the impacts are on artifacts once they do get wet from either water table rise or sea level rise, because there had been no studies on the type of artifacts that we find in Florida, what happens to them when this occurs. And this led to different organizations around the state of Florida who manage archaeological sites to actually change the way that they assess site status and preservation metrics to include groundwater, which they had previously not included. Along the way, though, I also ran into several issues working with archaeologists because we don't speak the same language, and we tend to have different approaches and use the same words differently, like the word diagenesis. So that led to me getting involved with founding a sustainable field school based on archaeology, and this is themed around the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we have first there Goal 11, which is related to preservation of cultural resources, and which includes our standard archaeology field techniques that the students need to learn if they want to work in archaeology. We also included goals related to accessibility, so this field school only runs once per week, so that students do not, typical field schools are full-time, 4 to 6 weeks. This allows students to retain caretaking responsibilities they may have at home, a job. They don't have to leave any of that to participate in the field school. We also provide a shuttle service to local public transit, which allows students to participate from 3 different counties in the area. And it's free, which is supported by an award from the Bureau of Land Management. And then lastly, my job was to come in and to educate the students participating in the field school about climate change, what the impacts of sea level and water level table rise are on our artifacts and archaeological sites, and then also to teach them some basic geology and oceanography so they don't have those same miscommunications I had when I started working with archaeologists. So I give them some basic training on some sedimentary and other geological methods so that they can work more efficiently with the environmental scientists they will be when they graduate. And also a plug, if you are an oceanographer, you can use archaeological sites to actually assess oceanographic change, and if you're interested in methods for how to do that, you can read my paper in ASLO Bulletin. Last, on to science training. There are two mechanisms through which I work towards training our future scientists. One is through my work with the Florida Undergraduate Research Organization, which, as I said, is a nonprofit. We run annual conferences for undergraduate students who are participating in research, for the faculty members and staff who work with and mentor those students. And then we also run an undergraduate research journal. And I'm also the founder and director of the Lynn Women in Science Conference, which is a mock conference for women in their teens to try to encourage them to get interested in science. All of this is with the goal of increasing retention in science. We've all heard of, I think, the leaky pipeline, where we tend to lose underrepresented groups in science, one of which is women. So I'm trying to keep those underrepresented groups in science. As an example of how we're doing that, I wanted to focus on the Florida Undergraduate Conference, which is one of our annual conferences. And this is a 2-day multidisciplinary conference, but it is dominated by STEM. And being in Florida with a lot of coastline, we have a lot of oceanographic posters presented at that conference. We have poster presentations, workshops, and a keynote to really show students what it's like to be at an actual conference. We try to keep it accessible. It's only 2 days, so that students only have to spend one night on a hotel. It's centrally located in Florida, so they're not driving 12 hours to get to it. It's only $75 for those 2 days, and that includes all the meals that the students need while they're at the conference, so that's dinner, breakfast, and lunch. And we do have waivers for students who cannot necessarily afford that. So the goal of FERC, when it was founded, was to expose these young scientists and researchers to what it was like to attend an academic conference so that they would get excited and want to stay in their field after they graduate. FERC is about 12 years old. So about 2 years ago, I partnered with a psychologist to see if FERC was actually doing what we designed it to do. So we distributed a survey to all the students who attended FERC 2 years ago, which was about 800 students. And about 200 of those students completed both our pre and our post survey. And we were able to show through these different scales that we distributed to students that presenting at the conference increased their perceived self-efficacy and research identity significantly. And these are both things that are strongly tied with students staying in STEM after they graduate. So it shows that attending a conference, even if it's a regional, local conference, can boost students' ability to stay in their field after they graduate. Furthermore, we collected demographic information on our students, and we looked at their perceived skill improvement and benefit of our well-represented students to our underrepresented students. These are students that are underrepresented in the US. And we were able to demonstrate that the students who are from underrepresented group had a significantly greater positive effect of conference attendance than either in their benefit or their perceived skill improvement, which could be things like their networking skills, their communication skills, their ability to plan and execute a project, than their more well-represented peers. So it seems that conference attendance can be a very strong and powerful tool in keeping those underrepresented groups in science. So our take-home message in this paper to conference organizers is to please make your conferences accessible to students, and to people who work with mentor undergraduate researchers is to try to get them to a conference, even if it's only a local, cheap conference like FERC. And working in broader issues and in science education has made me a very opinionated person, and I also feel strongly that if we express the things we struggled with and the things that we've overcome and share that experience with other people, that makes it easier for them. They have a path to follow. So I've written many opinion articles, and I would urge you to look for the one I have coming out in the L&O virtual issue. How-to, I wrote one on getting into educational research, and that came out just last week. And really, the broader issues in science training has made me a better aquatic science researcher. So I've been able to adapt a lot of skills I've learned in these more social science realms to aquatic science research. As an example, I'm currently distributing a research project. It's a survey of 2 submarine groundwater discharge researchers, asking them about what should be included in a definition of submarine groundwater discharge, because there are multiple definitions floating around in the literature from review papers, all of which contradict one another. So we're trying to come up with a community's consensus of what SGD is to make our research more consistent and to make meta-analyses easier. And lastly, I just wanted to thank my nominators, Adina and Isaac, who are obviously both very involved members of ASLO, Natasha, who is also an oceanographer who works with archaeologists and collaborates with me and is a member of ASLO, Sarah, who is the Southeast Director of the Florida Public Archaeology Network, and who helps me work not only with her as an archaeologist, but other archaeologists as well, and my good friend, colleague, and research partner, April Watson, who is the first archaeologist to invite me onto a excavation and get me started on that path. And I have a minute and a half for questions if anyone has any, or you can ask me afterwards.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, and you're clearly showing your brilliance in the many ways in which you contribute. I was actually interested with your data collection from the conference participation benefit. It seemed certain groups of students benefited more in skill gaining than others, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's somewhat unclear why those specific groups got more benefit than others. I think we are currently, that's just some of the data collected. We also collected data on like what financial aid they're getting, what universities they came from, and we're just scratching the surface on that. We also collected 4 open response questions from the students, which requires qualitative analysis, which neither of us are an expert on, so we're currently bringing in a 3rd researcher to help us with that. And we're hoping that the students will, through having that information, we'll be able to elucidate some of these reasons why some groups benefited and others didn't. And I will say that one of the most common comments we got was that students were worried about getting their posters done on time, which I think is common for a lot of researchers. All right, thank you.